And good evening. Barely a day after the top Republican lawmaker in the House made his pilgrimage to kiss the ring of the man who incited the Capitol insurrection, there is new video of the attack. It is, in many ways, the antidote to this grip and grin style shot at Mar-a-Lago, and that it serves as a reminder of what many will never forget, no matter how hard this Republican leader and others try to change the subject. First, we want to warn you, the footage from a police body cam is graphic, difficult to watch. It's also important to see, we think, because it's precisely what so many are now trying to push down the memory hole. The clip is evidence in proceedings against a man named Michael Foy, a former Marine from Michigan. As you can see, it shows the mob attacking a police officer, then dragging him away to be beaten. Foy is seen on the tape wielding a hockey stick. He's one of at least 21 military veterans arrested so far in the Capitol attack. We're going to have more on the story and that aspect of it a bit later in the program. We'll dig deeper into the troubling fact that so many former service members took part in the insurrection. We begin, though, tonight with new developments on COVID, which, like most things on the subject, consists of some measures of hope and a lot of measures of dread. First, the hope. New data showing a third vaccine, this one, the one from Johnson & Johnson, is also very effective. According to the numbers from a global phase 3 study, the single-shot vaccine was 66% effective in preventing moderate and severe disease and was 85% effective at preventing hospitalization and death. Now, its efficacy against moderate and severe disease varied from 57% in South Africa, where that new strain is endemic, and 72% in the United States. It's lower, you might realize, than the figure for 2 doses of the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, something Dr. Anthony Fauci today said was less of a real-world concern than you might imagine.
Now, the important issue, because the first thing people do is compare a 72% efficacy with the previously reported in other trials of 94 to 95%. That is true, but when one looks at the potential impact on a very important aspect of what we look at carefully, is namely severe disease, that overall in the United States, in South Africa, and in Brazil, the overall efficacy for severe disease was 85%. And in fact, in the study, including in the South African isolate, there were essentially no hospitalizations or deaths in the vaccine group, whereas in the placebo group, there were.
So Johnson & Johnson is expected now to apply for emergency use authorization next week. And because it's one shot, you just need one shot with this vaccine that doesn't require extreme refrigeration, it'll mean more people getting protected sooner. To that end, there may soon be active duty troops in addition to National Guard members giving out shots. CNN has gotten a look at a draft agreement between the Pentagon and FEMA calling for the military to provide 10,000 troops to help vaccinate around 450,000 people a day. Meantime, states that are leading the way in getting shots in arms got a shout-out today from the president's COVID team.
I want to call out 7 states that have already provided first vaccinations to more than 10% of their adult populations: Alaska, West Virginia, New Mexico, Connecticut, North Dakota, Oklahoma, and South Dakota. Well done.
It's worth noting that 5 of those 7 states are so-called red states. It's also hard not to contrast this between this administration's depoliticized approach when compared to the last administration's politically charged messaging.
As soon as April, the vaccine will be available to the entire general population, with the exception of places like New York State, where, for political reasons, the governor decided to say, and I don't think it's good politically. I think it's very bad from a health standpoint, but he wants to take his time on the vaccine.
Well, the current president toured a vaccination site in a gym at the Walter Reed Military Medical Center, where he also met with staff and wounded service members. But as we said just a moment ago, any hope today on that, or the welcome fact that new infections have finally started dropping, is offset by the prospect that even darker days could be just ahead. According to the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, the death toll could reach approximately 654,000 people by May 1st in this country. The IHME is calling it a worst-case scenario, which assumes widespread transmission of the variant first seen in South Africa. Now, more troubling is the Institute's new assumption, which it's building into its modeling from now on, that some states will simply not reimpose social distancing measures, even when daily deaths are high. I'm going to talk to the IHME's director in our second live hour tonight. We're on for 2 hours. In a moment, a live report on the president's effort to get his COVID relief bill through Congress, even if it means doing it with 51 Democratic votes.
I support passing COVID relief with support from Republicans if we can get it, but the COVID relief has to pass. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Thank you.
So there's a lot to get to tonight, starting with our medical team. CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta and Dr. Lena Wen, a CNN medical analyst, emergency medicine doctor, and former health commissioner for the city of Baltimore. Sanjay, can you break down the Johnson & Johnson numbers and explain the trial results?
Yeah, so let me just put the numbers up. We can put those up on the screen. What you're seeing basically is how effective this was against basically moderate to severe disease, and then on the right side of the screen is severe disease. I think this is a really important point. What the left side of the screen is telling you is that there's clearly some difference based on where these trials were conducted, and that's really reflecting the effectiveness against some of these variants. But it's really the right side of the screen that's the most important. You sort of alluded to this already. What is the purpose of the vaccine? To prevent severe illness, to prevent people from going to the hospital, hospitals becoming overwhelmed, and to prevent death. And that's where it's most effective. And interestingly, most effective sort of across the board, meaning it didn't seem to have a lowering of effectiveness based on the particular variants or based on where the trial was conducted. So it's that right side of the screen, I think, that is critically important. 85% protective against serious disease everywhere, including the variants.
And Sanjay, as Dr. Fauci said, a lot of people compare the Johnson & Johnson trial data to Pfizer's and Moderna's. Is it a straight comparison?
No, I think it's not. This is a little bit of a nuanced point, Anderson. I talked to Matai Mammon, he's the head of R&D for Johnson & Johnson, about this specific thing. I want you to listen to this, and I'll explain a little bit about what he's talking about here. Take a listen. How does this vaccine stack up to what has already been authorized in the United States, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines?
The honest answer is they can't be compared head-to-head, because the vaccine programs with mRNA recruited and accrued cases in a different time where the incidence was much lower, so less pressure on the vaccine to protect, and there were none of these problematic variants that everyone's talking about right now.
So what he's saying basically, it's not just what the vaccine is showing in terms of its efficacy, but also when the trial was conducted. I think a way to think about this, Anderson, is that this Johnson & Johnson trial, the vaccine was actually being trialed against a sicker population. There was more virus out there. There was more pressure from the virus on the vaccines, but also there was more of these variants that we're talking about. So, one way to think about it is, how would Moderna and Pfizer do now? What would their trial results show now if it was trialed right now like Johnson & Johnson was? Maybe it wouldn't be the same. Maybe it would. We don't know. But it's hard to compare it apples to apples because the trials were done at such different times.
And Dr. Wen, I understand you were actually a participant in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine trial, and you're going to receive a second dose. Now, if this is a one-dose vaccine, why are you receiving a second dose?
Yeah, so I decided to participate in the Johnson & Johnson clinical trial because that was the trial that was available to me at the time. I actually would have had no issues with participating in any of the other trials either. By the time that I enrolled in the trial, the only there are two arms of the trial. One is the 1-dose and one is the 2-dose. So unlike Pfizer and Moderna, which is studied only as a 2-dose vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was initially studied as a 1-dose vaccine. But then the researchers thought, what if with a second shot, you might get more protection or even longer lasting protection than 1 dose alone. And so the second shot is actually given 60 days after the first. And I would just say that I agree with Sanjay. I actually think that these results today are really promising because if you had told us back in October that we might get a single dose vaccine that can be stored at refrigerator temperatures for months, and so regular doctor's offices can be giving this out, if you're telling us that this vaccine can prevent severe disease and specifically can prevent basically all cases of hospitalizations and deaths, I think that's really remarkable. So I'm personally excited as a participant in the trial too.
So the second dose, that's part of the study as well?
That's right. So the initial group, and that's the group that they just released the studies from, that's the group that were enrolled in only the one-dose trial. Then there are other people, tens of thousands of other people, including me, who are enrolled in a separate trial that's looking at the two-dose version.
Okay, so it's not like you got the one dose and then you're like, oh, I don't have confidence in this, so I'm going to, like, on the side go and get a dose. This is actually part of the study. It's all legit. Sanjay, as I mentioned, Johnson & Johnson's expected to apply for emergency use authorization next week. Is there any reason to think the FDA wouldn't grant it? And how would a third vaccine impact the rollout?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any reason. You know, we followed, obviously, the whole process of the emergency use authorization for Moderna and Pfizer. We've seen how that goes. We'll follow the committee meetings very carefully on this as well. But I don't think there's any reason. I mean, we talked about the efficacy, but also the safety data was quite promising as well. They collected 2 months of safety data, just like you saw with Moderna and Pfizer. As far as the rollout goes, it's interesting. So this is a big company. Dr. Mammon, who you just saw, he said they'll make 1 billion doses potentially of this particular vaccine in 2021. Obviously, most of that going around the world. 100 million of those doses have been purchased here in the United States, and they've already been manufacturing at risk, meaning that they're going to have a lot of vaccine already available to go. So he told me they would start shipping the next day after a potential emergency use authorization is given, and then they'll roll it out. I mean, the expectation is at least 100 million doses by June. Could go faster than that, and they could potentially even provide more to the United States if the United States requests and purchases more.
And just because Dr. Nguyen mentioned this, Sanjay, but it doesn't require special refrigeration, right? I guess it requires refrigeration, just not the special kind that the other one does. Is that right?
Right. Normal refrigeration, and it can stay for months. I mean, I think the official thing is 3 months, but potentially even longer than that. So it's got a long shelf life at normal temperatures. That's
amazing, because that means it could be at regular doctor's offices and other places that don't have the special kind. Sanjay, Dr. Nguyen, thank you as always. Have a good weekend.